Today I am delighted to be joined by Duncan Samuel, who runs Gazeal. Gazeal is a business that's set to change the way that we buy and sell property in this country, and indeed is a business that here at Move IQ we are delighted to be associated with. Duncan, thank you for joining me today. For the benefit of our viewers, can you just kind of talk us through the whole Gazeal process?
Well, the Gazeal process works in various different ways. First of all, it provides information upfront so that the seller is putting together everything that constitutes the contract pack at the point at which the property is listed for sale. That's done at no cost to the seller at that stage and at no cost to the agent.
Well, they're going to do it anyway, aren't they? So it's just bringing it forward, instructing their solicitor to prepare the pack.
Exactly. So it puts together the entire contract pack, all of the Law Society protocol forms, all the supporting documentation like fencer certificates and everything like that. It will put together all of the searches that need to be done at the time, and it will also put together the contract and indeed the Gazeal agreement. So all of that is then made available to the buyer for them to view before they make an offer, or at the time when they're thinking about making an offer.
So if a buyer says to an agent, I'm interested in that house, it's being sold under the Gazeal system, will the agent actually send them the pack?
The agent will simply send them, register them on the system. The system will send them their login details to be able to get onto the system, and they can view everything, including all of the details of the seller, the details of the property, the details, all of the land registry title deeds, all of the Law Society protocol forms, so they can see exactly which fixtures and fittings are included and which are not, whether the chandelier is staying, whether it's going, everything like that. Including all of the searches, so they can see about planning permissions that have been applied for, whether the roads are adopted, the drains, etc., etc.
So they're fully informed at the point that they decide to make an offer?
Fully informed at the point where they decide to make an offer, and if they decide to make an offer, they can just either amend the details of the offer that that they've already told the agent about and the agent has put into the system, or they can just click to go ahead and accept and make that offer. And then that will be sent through to the agent, and it's for the agent then to pass that offer on to the seller, again through the Gazeal system. So the seller can then view all of the details of the buyer, the offer that's been made, and it will also pick up for the seller's benefit whether or not that buyer is in a chain, whether they've got a mortgage, or whether they're a cash buyer. So everything that they need to evaluate whether or not they actually want to accept that offer.
So in all intents and purposes, it removes misunderstanding.
Exactly.
Over telephone calls from the buyer saying, yes, I'm cash.
Exactly.
And actually they're not cash and they haven't got the cash.
Exactly. It removes uncertainty. And we have had, interestingly, one occasion where we had somebody, despite all of the warnings on the website, said, yes, I'm a cash buyer. And it turned out later on that he was buying with a mortgage.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people who are buying with a mortgage think that they're not in a chain and therefore they're paying cash. It's not quite.
Yes,
quite
exactly.
So everybody's informed at the time of offer and acceptance of offer that the seller has provided a pack of information. The buyers look to that, they've decided it's the house for them, they offer, two parties are together, and then that pack presumably gets emailed straight to the purchaser's solicitor, and they can start work.
Yes, exactly. They select a solicitor from the panel of solicitors. There's a drop-down menu. They can get quotes from all of those different solicitors, and it has some information about all of them. If they choose one, then the pack is sent through to that solicitor. So the solicitor has a full contract pack, including all of the searches, on the day that the offer is made and accepted.
Fantastic.
So at a step, saving you weeks, if not months. And a faster transaction is one that is less likely to fall out of bed.
I love the fact that you're getting momentum into the deal from the first day. Everybody knows where they are, things are happening, technology is enabling it, and we're up and running.
Exactly, that's exactly what we're aiming to do. Because speed means speed, and transparency engenders trust, and trust means that fewer deals actually get to fall out of bed.
I obviously, in my work, come across lots of buyers, and many of them inexperienced. Even if you've moved home 3 or 4 times, it doesn't actually make you that experienced. And so often, I hear people say, yeah, everything's fine. Well, where has it gone? Oh, I don't know, but everything's fine. No news is actually bad news.
Exactly. You need to have that transparency to show that something is going on, because if one party or the other, it could well be that the buyer, for example, thinks that everything's going perfectly well, but if the seller hasn't seen any movement because it hasn't been communicated to him, he's going to get the impression that the buyer has done nothing, and that means that he's going to have a lack of trust in the buyer's commitment to get through to exchange, and that means that it's going to be more likely to fall through. Transparency and making sure that all parties are fully informed is the key to a successful transaction.
There are there's so many moving parts, aren't there? And there's so many people involved, and people have got different hopes and aspirations to the deal, and it's very important to people at the end. It might not be quite so important to people in the middle.
Oh, exactly. There's not only obviously the agent, but there's the buyer, there's the seller, there's the buyer solicitor, the seller solicitor, and there's the mortgage broker. Exactly. So many different parties, and they've all got their own different motivation and their own different obligations, and they don't always align. So making sure that it does get through to the end is making sure that there's total transparency, and people can see exactly who the next job is with and what they've got to be doing, so that everyone can know exactly what's happening.
I think it's fantastic. I really do. It's very timely. It's very necessary.
Thank you.
There's a lot of wasted money and upset people and stressed people when these deals collapse.
Yes, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has estimated in the budget in 2016 that consumers waste £270 million per annum in wasted legal fees and expenses as a result of transactions that failed to complete. That's over about one third of all transactions. So that's about 300,000 transactions a year fall out of bed.
How far do you think you can get that down?
Well, we aim to bring it down to as low as we possibly can. Yes, exactly.
Well, if you've got a willing buyer and a willing seller, you've got to let's get them together. Let's get the deal done.
You give them the opportunity to be able to legally bind that deal in, because of course the big problem that you have in the system in England and Wales is an offer to buy a property is not binding until exchange of contracts, which will not be under the system as it is now for a couple of months. And in that time, anything could happen. People change their mind, they see other properties, their circumstances change, and in the meanwhile, the innocent party has possibly spent thousands of pounds progressing that deal. And that's a big hit for anybody to take, particularly first-time buyers who have probably had to save quite hard to be able to afford the fees and expenses that are involved in a transaction.
And of course, that money is coming off the first-time buyer's deposit.
Exactly.
That they've saved up carefully.
Exactly.
And you take £1,000 off a deposit, and actually that reduces your affordability on the mortgage, and the whole thing comes much harder.
And the whole thing it follows around in a vicious cycle, yes. And by the time they saved up the money again as well to start the process again, it's likely that the whole market has moved on. So if they lose £1,000, they might have to be saving up £1,200.
How did it come about? Tell me your kind of background and how did this...
Well, my background is that I'm a solicitor, and I set up in 2003 the first truly online conveyancing business in the UK, which is called Convex Conveyancing. One of the experiences of running a conveyancing business was the most frustrating element was that no matter how hard you tried to deliver the best customer service, firstly, it's very difficult to control because you have no control over the different parties involved, and secondly, that period of uncertainty in between offer and exchange meant that the client's experience of your service overall was always anxiety and worry, no matter how good a service you provided. It's very, very difficult to do. And it means that everybody going through a property transaction in the UK actually has a very stressful time.
I mean, it's never easy buying properties. It's always stressful. It's always emotional, and there is a lot of uncertainty.
It is a very emotional thing, as you know even better than I. Buying a property is you're not just buying a pile of bricks and mortar, unless of course you're a pure buy-to-let buyer. You're buying somewhere where you want to live with your wife, you want your children to go to school, there's a community that you want to be a part of. So you're buying a life and a lifestyle. You're not just buying a bunch of bricks and mortar. So having it fall out of bed can be hugely anxious.
I wonder how it compares with other places around the world.
Well, on civil law systems, which is the system across all of Europe, if you make an offer to buy a property, which is done through a notaire, a notarius, and a notaio, depending upon which jurisdiction you're in, it's instantly binding, and you can't walk away. It's agreed subject to the notary public confirming that the title to that property is good and registering it for you. Obviously, in Scotland, it's done in a slightly different way through exchange of missives. In America, it works pretty much in the way that we're designing in Gazeal, in that the offer is made, you have a buyer's realtor and a seller's realtor, and they will exchange contracts between them without the lawyers being involved, subject to the lawyers checking the title. So it works in very much a similar sort of way, the same as it does in Canada, and Australia works on a system that's closer to ours than that, but also has a far lower fall through rate.
And yet, the United Kingdom is perceived as a good and easy place, straightforward to do business in.
Yes, according to the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index, which is published every year, we are at the moment, I believe, the 6th easiest country in the world to do business. But when it comes to transacting a property, we're the 57th easiest country in the world to do business, which is really quite shocking. Yes, yeah, it's easier to buy a property in Kazakhstan than it is to buy a property here.
Yeah. We've got a lot of catching up to do, but hopefully with the Gazeal product, I mean, that's what this is about.
That's what this is about. Yes, that's what this is about. It's we want to be the platform on which everybody transacts a property transaction in the UK.
What do people need to be mindful of? What are the costs of gazealing a deal?
Well, the costs is that it's £250, up to £1 million value in transaction. Thereafter, it's 0.025%, so it's £250 per million.
Whether you're buying or selling?
Whether you're buying or selling. So what you need to be aware of as a buyer is that the advantage is that the seller is completely committed at the point when they sign the Gazeal agreement, but you are yourself committing to do the things that you would normally do in the property transaction. If you're buying with a mortgage, you're committing to submit a mortgage application within a certain time. And you're accepting that the seller is going to get visibility of the fact that you've done that. You're committing to confirm that you got a mortgage offer, and you're committing that your solicitor is going to be advising Gazeal that the title to that property is good and marketable. So Gazeal can ensure that that risk is underwritten for you on completion. So you've got absolute certainty that if anything does, God forbid, go wrong, then it's a straightforward insurance claim, and you're covered up to the maximum, the total value of the property for a one-off premium of £50, which is excellent value.
Can you talk me through that insurance product? Because it's a nice sort of safety blanket should things go wrong.
Yes, it's underwritten for us by Dual Asset Underwriting, and actually the insurer is Royal Sun Alliance and XL Catlin, so it's all A-rated paper that sits behind it. Basically what it's covering is the risk that there is anything to do with the title to the property that would mean that an arm's length third-party buyer would think twice about submitting an offer, or an arm's length third-party mortgage lender would lend against it. If there is a problem that wasn't revealed at the time that would therefore have the effect of devaluing the property in some way, then, for example, right away across the back garden that wasn't disclosed at the time, then that would obviously affect the price, and then the insurance policy could kick in to be able to pay for that defect.
And what happens if, in the interim, someone's personal situation changes and they decide not to buy or not to sell? What happens then?
There is a flip side to certainty, and that you're providing certainty for the other party in the transaction. If you want to have certainty the seller's not going to walk away, then you yourself are going to be providing the seller with some certainty. So it is a contract, and so you need to think about it very carefully before you enter into it.
If you withdraw, does the seller? What does the seller do?
If you withdraw, then first of all, there is a reservation deposit that you will have either have put down, or you will have taken out a bond using our systems to guarantee your performance as the buyer under the contract, and you will instantly be forfeiting that reservation deposit of 1% of the total value of the property, which would form what we lawyers call the liquidated damages, and then you would still remain in breach, so there would be unliquidated damages after that for any other loss that the seller might be able to prove that they've suffered. So you need to be you do not enter into this lightly. It is a legally binding agreement.
But that's the whole idea of it.
That is the whole idea of it. You're entering in a binding agreement that it binds but the other party, the seller, sell it to you, subject to your having obtained a mortgage offer that is acceptable to you, and your solicitor confirming to us that you've instructed him that you're going to accept that mortgage offer, and secondly, to your solicitor confirming to us that the title meets that standard of good and marketable title.
So speed and transparency, obviously very important, but that's only one element to the Gazeal option, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And what we also aim to do is provide certainty insofar as we possibly can. So for those parties who want to, if you've made your offer and the seller has accepted the offer, then both parties can decide to use our own proprietary Gazeal reservation agreement. So you can actually tie that deal that you've both agreed in to make it legally binding on the day that the offer is made and accepted. It is subject to two conditions. The first is that the buyer gets their mortgage offer through, and secondly, that the buyer's conveyancer confirms to us that the title is good and marketable.
Okay. And once that's happened,
we will issue
as much certainty as you can.
Yes, exactly. Because once that's happened, we get the information from the buyer's conveyancer that those two elements have been satisfied. Then both the buyer is contractually obliged to the seller to exchange contracts.
I love this because for so many years people have gone, oh, the solicitor dragging the heels, the solicitor's not done that. Actually, now you're putting the emphasis back on the mortgage company because you want the mortgage company to issue their mortgage offer like that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, in the last few years, it has to be said, the way that mortgage companies operate has improved significantly. Because now the average time to getting for most of the big lenders to getting a mortgage offer out is down to 10 to 12 days. On their own statistics, but actually anecdotally, dealing with most of the mortgage brokers, it's actually slightly shorter than that. Yeah. So you can get through to it being fully legally binding with all of the conditions satisfied very quickly if you make sure that mortgage offer is submitted quickly.
It's all music to my ears, Duncan. It really is. It's tidying all of the loose, flappy ends and all the moving parts and just bolting it all together.
Yes, and trying to provide transparency, so the agent and the buyer and the seller are able to see all the documentation that is common to both parties and see the cases that moves through the system.
Should have happened years ago.
Well,
at least it's happening now.
Yes, exactly.
Tell me
Sorry, I've been a bit slow off the mark there.
How are the sales agents responding to Gazeal?
Sales agents responding to it very positively indeed. Very positively indeed. So those agents that engage and are using it, once they've used it one or two times, we find that they tend to just stick with it and use the Gazeal system. Yeah. We have agents now who do not list properties other than as Gazeal properties or accept offers other than via the Gazeal system, because otherwise why wouldn't you? Because otherwise it just cuts down so much on wasted viewings, all of that wasted marketing effort and everything that goes on associated with that.
I mean, business is hard enough for agents as it is. Actually.
Exactly.
They need their business to be as efficient as possible.
As efficient as they possibly can. Yes, exactly. A few years ago it was an average 7 viewings to get one offer. I think it's far higher than that now, sort of 12 to 14. That is a lot of wasted time. That's all got to be paid for if you're operating as most agents are on a pure transaction, no completion, no fee basis.
Any particular points that either buyers or sellers should be aware of, do you think, of going into one of these situations? Well,
first of all, is they've got to be aware that certainty is a flip side. They will be getting the benefits that deal is tied in, but it places obligations on both parties. The seller obviously is aware that the buyer's tied in, and he gets transparency of what the buyer's doing. The buyer is obviously aware that the seller's tied in, but the buyer has to apply for the mortgage within the timescales that he's got, and the seller will be able to view the milestones as it goes through to see that the mortgage has been applied for, the mortgage offer has been received, and also the title has been checked. And if those are not happening in the timescales that are anticipated, then the seller will obviously be asking why. And if there's not a reasonable reason for the delay, then that buyer might risk losing that deal because he might find himself in breach of that agreement.
It's about getting people to perform, to do what they say they're going to do.
Exactly.
It's not that complicated.
Exactly.
You want to buy the house, you want to sell the house, let's get on with it.
Exactly. We like to think of this as a form of electronic handshake, that people are able to reach out over the internet and shake hands on a deal and establish a relationship of trust.
I like it. About time too. Have you any thoughts on where the market might be heading? I mean, it's a difficult time. No one's got a crystal ball, but
it is a difficult time with Brexit bringing uncertainty is never good for the housing market. I think one of the things that's also interesting is, particularly for the London market, is the impact of the money laundering regulations. There's a lot that's been written in the press about how much of the London property market is stoked by money being laundered through the market, which makes that money is obviously not sensitive to price, and inevitably pushes the price up, increases the cash liquidity in the market, and is going to push the price up. It's just a few days ago, before the filming of this, as you'll be aware, Countrywide have been issued with a fairly substantial fine for failing in their money laundering systems. It has been raised in the House of Parliament that there has to be increased tightening up on agents around money laundering, and HMRC seem to be tightening up their requirements. It will be interesting to see what happens and whether or not that's going to have a significant impact upon the cash liquidity in the London market, and what impact that will have on prices.
So post-Brexit, you feel there will be an even further tightening up on money and where it comes from, and particularly if it's coming from abroad, it needs to kind of...
I think that there will be a certain tightening. I don't think that we will see a lack of liquidity akin to what we had in 2008. And hopefully the liquidity in the market post-Brexit will be the right liquidity, and not anything that we don't particularly want in the UK market.
I mean, I guess that's unlikely to affect you or I, but actually if large amounts of cash suddenly stops arriving into the London market from wherever it comes from and however it's made, that would have had a trickle-down effect through the market, and you're saying that that's unlikely to happen anymore.
I think so. Yes, I think so. But it's the trickle-down effect is an interesting question to discuss, isn't it? It's and how much that's been affected by the higher rates for stamp duty, land tax on company vehicles and at higher level properties. And what effect that's had. It's a very interesting question, one that I'm sure we could talk about for a very long time.
We could. Equally at the other end of the market, the first-time buyer market, and all the systems that are there to help them. I mean, there's lots of criticism and chat about those as well. So this is why the market fascinates you and me. It's because there's always variables. There's always moving parts. Exactly.
There are always variables and there are always moving parts.
But it makes it endlessly fascinating.
It does make it endlessly fascinating. It does make it. But it's also would be, again, one of the things I think that is one of the reasons why we all set Gazeal up is because we want people to be able to transact safely and securely, and particularly for first-time buyers. They have had a tough time just lately, and it's despite Help to Buy and things like that. It is hard saving up for all of that, going to the bank of mum and dad, getting your deposit and getting the money to pay the costs. Anything we can do to help that transact more securely is going to benefit not only them but the market as a whole.
Duncan, good luck to you. Very nice.
Thank you very much, Phil. Pleasure to talk to you. Thanks.